Hello to everyone joining us after the networking session. Our next speaker is Professor Miodrag Zivkovic. He is assistant professor at Singidunum University, Serbia, and he's going to talk about swarm intelligence. Swarm intelligence, or SE, is the collective behavior of decentralized self-organized systems, natural or artificial. The concept is employed in work on artificial intelligence. Miodrag University career is in Serbia for the last 4 years at Singidunum University in Belgrade. He is involved in scientific research in the field of computer science, and his specialty includes object-oriented programming, mobile application programming, software testing, scholastic optimization algorithms, swarm intelligence, human-computer interaction, as well as artificial intelligence algorithms. Welcome, Professor.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. So let me share my presentation.
Yes, everything is perfect. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So today I want to talk about swarm intelligence, which is one of the fields in the science which had a lot of interest, which draw a lot of interest in the recent times. And what we have noticed is that the most people actually, even if they are in the field, they don't know what actually the swarm intelligence is. So the goal of this presentation and this let's call the introduction is to introduce you to the swarm intelligence, so what actually it is, so what we can do with it, how it was inspired, how do we implement it, and what kind of problems we can solve with it. So first of all, this is not something new. So the biologists have been investigating and studying the behavior of the insects, which are very simple units, for a long time, and they observed something which they called the collective intelligence. So what is that? So this is the behavior of the insects when they are found in large groups. So they tend to show much more intelligent and coordinated behavior than just when they are just individuals. And when they are in large groups, they are able to solve some really complex problems. For example, if we just look at the ant colony or something like that, we can see that they are able to find the shortest path between their nest and to the food source, for example. So they also tend to show different strategies when hunting. For example, dragonflies tend to show different approaches when they hunt for their prey, like smaller insects and similar. Also, scientists observed a lot of intelligent behavior when we talk about the mating process. So just imagine the fireflies and their complex flashing abilities, which are used to attract females. So they tend to show very complex behavior, and also for the migration. So you can just assume that let's go back to the dragonflies. So they also tend to migrate, and they are able to travel large distances, like hundreds and thousands of kilometers, of course, when they are found in swarms. So those are a very complex behavior for such simple individuals. And scientists observe that they are unsophisticated when they are observed as a unit, but they actually are able to make wonders when they are found in swarms. So this is the basis from which the swarm intelligence actually started. So what we are trying to solve with the swarm intelligence. So what we need the swarm intelligence. In the modern computer science, there is something which is called the NP-hard problems. So this is actually the part of the computational complexity and the theory of computational complexity, and a lot of problems in the modern computer science are considered to be the MP hard problems. So those kind of problems are the problems which we cannot solve within the polynomial time by applying just the deterministic or the traditional approach. So what does this mean? This means that we cannot get the solution fast enough. So we need a time which is unacceptable, because we would wait too much to get any kind of the result. And however, we still have a lot of problems which are MP hard and which we must somehow solve in order to solve a lot of problems in the modern computer science. So what are those modern problems which we can solve with the swarm intelligence? So what are the MP hard problems? So just for example, I have listed here a few. So, for example, from the field of wireless sensor networks, the MP hard problems are the localization, or how the wireless sensor can be localized into some space where they are distributed. Then the load balancing between the sensors, and of course the prolonging of the network lifetime, because if you don't do the load balancing in the appropriate way, you will get into the position that some of the crucial nodes and the crucial positions in the network will run out of energy, and therefore the complete network will be shut down. Also, we have similar problems in the cloud computing workflow, and the scheduling tasks in the cloud computing domain are also considered to be MP hard. And since this is the data science conference, of course, I wanted to touch also the part with the data science. The artificial neural networks also have some MP hard problems, such as the hyperparameter optimization, for example. So this is also considered to be the MP hard problem. And if we just try to solve these kind of problems with the traditional approaches, it is not possible to do it in what we call the reasonable amount of time. So we must try to find out some other algorithm or some other approach which we can utilize to solve this. And metaheuristics are one of the shapes of the stochastic approaches. So what is the goal of the metaheuristic? We don't target to find necessarily the best solution. We just want to find a solution which is good enough. So this is not necessarily the best solution, but this is a good enough solution which we can find in the reasonable amount of time. And in the most cases, this is perfectly acceptable. So we might not get the very best solution, but we get a very good solution within a reasonable amount of time. And recently, due to this ability, the metaheuristics algorithms have been utilized in solving a large number of MP hard problems. Some of those were the ones I mentioned a few moments ago. And one of the most important families of the metaheuristics approaches is, of course, the bio-inspired or the nature-inspired algorithms, which I have briefly already introduced. So why we pick the nature-inspired algorithms? Well, we want to use the nature itself. So why trying to solve something on our own when we can use the ideas and the approaches from the nature, who has been solving successfully very difficult evolutionary problems through the billions of years of the history of the life on the planet Earth. So for any species in the world, the main evolutionary goals are the same. So we can see that for any kind of living unit, their goal is to maximize the breeding, feeding, and some other similar basic processes which they are actually required to survive and to flourish. So also how to hunt and catch up prey, also how not to become a prey and not be hunted, and so on. So we want to use the ideas from the nature, who has been solving these kind of problems a lot longer than we actually do. And when we talk about the nature-inspired approaches, we have two distinctive groups which we can observe. First one are the evolutionary algorithms, and the second one are the swarm intelligence algorithms. Both of those are actually the part of the nature-inspired algorithms. So when we talk, I want to first briefly introduce the evolutionary algorithms. So they try to mimic the process of the natural selection, or as the biologists like to say, it is the survival of the fittest individuals. So we try to mimic this behavior programmatically, of course. So we try to select the fittest individuals from the group and select them for breeding to get the offspring for the next generation, and with the goal that the next generation will and the offspring will actually get the beneficial characteristics from the parents, and that the new generation actually will have better characteristics and resulting in, of course, better chance for survival. So national selection starts with selecting the fittest individual, and also our algorithms, if we use the approach of the evolutionary algorithms, also start with selecting of the fittest individuals. And then we select them for breeding, and then at the end, after several iterations, we will, as the result, get a generation of the fittest individuals. On the other hand, the swarm intelligence algorithms, as I mentioned, were observed by the biologists, and they noticed that some of very simple and primitive individuals can show really complex behavior, also social behavior, that they also can collaborate and they communicate within the group, which we call the swarm, and that's why the name swarm intelligence. And as you can see from the example, so those are typically some really simple units, such as bees, ants, moths, butterflies, fireflies, dragonflies, fish, and so on. So they are otherwise simple units, but when they are found in swarms, they can exhibit really complex behavior, and they can do it without any kind of central unit which would coordinate over the other individuals. So they tend to organize themselves somehow, and they don't need some central brain which will coordinate them. And this feature of the swarms of the primitive animals was used as the inspiration and the basis of the swarm intelligence algorithms. So just to name the few of the most famous algorithms, there are many more, of course. So one of the first was the particle swarm optimization, which was based on the collective behavior of the flocks of birds and fish. And for example, the ABC algorithm, which is also one of the oldest, which simulates the artificial bee colony, so the behavior of the bees. Then also, I have mentioned here one of the most popular and most important in the past 10 years. So those are the Firefly and the Dragonfly algorithm. Firefly, of course, tries to mimic the flashing behavior of the fireflies. Dragonfly algorithm, for example, tries to mimic the hunting and migration behavior of the swarms of the dragonflies. For example, dragonflies, when they want to migrate, they tend to make a large swarms, and they are able to travel over huge distances. But when they hunt, they try to they form smaller parties, just for example 5 or 6 of them, and they hunt together. So in the smaller swarms, they hunt for some smaller insects like flies and so on. Then of course there are also the elephant herding optimization and the gray wolf optimizer. So I wanted to mention those two as well, as they are based on the behavior of some much more intelligent individuals. So of course wolves are much more intelligent than just the fireflies. So for example, the gray wolf algorithm actually is based on the hunting strategy of the gray wolves, and also the Harris Hawk optimization is based on very complex hunting strategy of the Harris hawks. So this is one of the most interesting algorithms, for example, where actually they used the hunting behavior of the hawks to mimic the algorithm for the swarm intelligence. So, for example, the Harris hawks start by perching on some trees and monitoring the area, and then when they see some rabbit or something like that, they hunt together in hunting parties, 5 or 6 of them. So they employ different strategies how to exhaust the rabbit until he barely cannot even move, and then the leading hawk will just perform the kill. So you can see that we draw our inspiration from really large number of social behavior which we were able and which biologists were able, of course, to observe in the nature. So just to give you the sense how the process actually goes, so I wanted to show this on the Firefly algorithm. So the first thing is try to see what kind of behavior we want to mimic. So if we, for example, look at the Fireflies, they are distinguished by their luminary flashing activities, which they use for mating, of course, for attracting the females, then for the communication, and also as the risk warning for incoming predators, for example. And inspired by those activities, the Firefly method was formulated. Of course, typically, because the behavior is too complex, you need to also take some assumptions. So, for example, for the Firefly algorithm, the assumptions were that all the Fireflies are actually unisexual. So it doesn't depend on the gender of the Firefly, and that each Firefly is actually attracted to other Fireflies based on the flashing brightness. So if the other individual is brighter, the Firefly will tend to go toward the brighter individual. So the less brighter Fireflies tend to go to the brighter Fireflies. And if in case, for example, that there are no brighter Fireflies, Firefly will just go in random fashion. So actually we can draw some rules from this behavior. So, for example, each Firefly is attracted to other Fireflies, and we consider that all are unisex. We determine the attractiveness of the Firefly based on the light level. So light level actually decreases with the distance. So the attractiveness of the individual Firefly will actually increase with the reduction of the distance, and they will actually become brighter. And then we define something which is called the fitness function by the Firefly's brightness. The fitness function is typically the mathematical modulation formalization of the problem which we want to solve. And just again to show you how the process goes, I just wanted to show you that we want to express this kind of behavior mathematically. So this is the first goal, because of course to implement the algorithm we need to somehow transfer the real behavior of the Fireflies into something which we can model by programming it in some programming language. So we start by generating random Fireflies, which are random solutions. So we have the group of solutions. So each solution is represented as one Firefly, and then we need, for example, in this case for the Firefly algorithm, we need to measure the distance between the two Fireflies. We use the Cartesian distance in this case. Then we modulate and approximate the light intensity, again mathematically with the formula, where we can see that it actually drops with the increase of the distance. And then we also calculate the attractiveness of the two Fireflies, and those are just the mathematical formulations of what I have introduced about the behavior of the fireflies. And then typically we need to define how the solutions will update the positions, because in each iteration fireflies will move. So each firefly will move either to a brighter firefly, or it will move in random fashion if there are no brighter fireflies. And then when we model this kind of behavior, we tend to formulate the algorithm. So this is example how the formulated algorithm, Firefly algorithm, looks like. So as you can see, we first generated the population, we defined the objective function. So this is the function which we want to solve and which we want to optimize, either by finding the minimum or the maximum value. So in some cases we want to optimize by getting the minimum, and some other we want to get the maximum. It depends, of course. We determine the intensity of each firefly, and then through the iterations, we see that we move the fireflies, we move each firefly according to the rules which we have specified through the equations which I have just shown you. So after the end of this algorithm, we will have the list of fireflies, and we will rank them, and we will find the best solution. So this best solution will represent, of course, the value which is good enough, but not necessarily the best. But this is typically good enough for any practical use. So how this complete story actually is connected to the artificial neural networks? Because again, this is the data science conference. I wanted to give a brief introduction also for the artificial neural networks and their connectivity to the swarm intelligence. So we use artificial neural networks to solve a wide number of problems, and typically those are either the shape recognition or the classification, clustering, prediction of some time series, and so on. So the artificial neural networks can learn, and they can then be trained, of course, to solve, for example, for the medical purposes. There are many implementations, for example, for heart conditions, for different types of cancer, and based on the image classification and so on. So what we see is that the artificial neural networks have a wide application today in a wide number of domains. And how they do it, they actually are able to process vast amounts of information during the training stage, and then later on, when the network is trained, they can reduce the time needed for the diagnostics. For example, if we look at the medical domain of the application. What is the problem with the artificial neural networks? Well, we need to do the network training, and unfortunately, there is no general solution. So you have two problems with the neural networks. First of all, you need to determine the structure of the neural network, and then also to see the weights between the individual neurons. And there is no solution which fits all possible problems. So it's not possible, okay, I found the best solution, for example, for heart conditions, and that I use that same solution, for example, in some other domain for predicting, I don't know, rainfall level in Malaysia or something like that. No, it is actually necessary to do the training, and it is typically done with try and error. So you try, you get bad results, try again with some different parameters, so on. So we typically observe the mean square error when we try to determine if the artificial neural network is precise or not. And this problem of training of the network is MP hard, because the search space is huge. So each of the nodes actually in the neural network are the neurons, and each nodes between themselves, they can send signals like the neurons in our brain. So we represent these signals by the real numbers. So every neuron yield actually is based on some nonlinear function. And those connections between the neurons usually have the weights which will adjust during the network training and learning. And during these adjustments, the neural network will start to produce the results which are near to desired output. So this is the problem which we must solve. So to try to get the weights of the neurons in the appropriate way. So after a huge amount of weight adjustments, you can stop at some point based on some criteria. And this is the goal what we actually want to solve with this with the swarm intelligence. So for example, I just wanted to show one example which we did. So we use the multilayer perceptron, sorry, which is the type of the feed-forward neural network, and which consists of at least 3 layers, which are all in one directional mode. So one input layer, one hidden layer, and one output layer. And this is the structure of this kind of network. So we have the input layer, the hidden layer. It can be more of them, but in this case, there is only one hidden layer, and the output layer. And how we optimize the training. So we want to optimize the function, which is actually a set of weights, and this objective function, of course, based on what is our goal, can be either maximized or minimized depending on the problem. And typically, when we want to train the neural networks, what we tend to do and what we want to do is to reduce the error. So we want to reduce the error for the neural network. And this is the typical example how the complete process looks like. So we feed the network to feed the algorithm. We train the network with the algorithm, and then when we get the acceptable result in terms of mean square error, we say that we have found our candidate which we can use for solving the concrete problem. So for example, this was what we use for the breast cancer data set, for example. So to try to summarize at the end, one of the greatest problems which we have when we talk about the machine learning algorithms is actually to establish the optimal parameters for a specific problem. So unfortunately, there is no solution that fits all problems. And different set of parameters should be determined for each specific problem. And since this is considered to be the NP-hard problem by nature, we try to solve this by using the metaheuristics approach, which I have just discussed. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.